Well, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. If you're having trouble getting yourself on camera, we have you muted, so that you can't undo right now. But if you have trouble getting yourself on camera, you may notice that there's a little warning at the top of your Zoom screen that says, the Hellenbergs are on and Miriam, you're on, that says that you have to okay something, and the okaying that you're doing is just letting Zoom know that we're also on YouTube, and we actually have quite a nice group on YouTube. This is my first time to ever do YouTube and Zoom together, so I knew how to do one and I knew how to do the other, but I never knew how to do both of them. So yesterday, Anne Marie gave me a call and said, "Hey, Elaine and I were talking about it, and we want to go. We think we should probably do a hybrid, or I guess this isn't a hybrid, an online." So here we are, and I got to learn how to do new software. So Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It'll be a short, but hopefully lovely Shabbat. I did not receive a lot of questions, although I did from Bruce, sent me a bunch, and they were all related to what's going on in Israel. So I can attempt to answer those. Two things. If you have names that you would like mentioned that are not already on the Yard Site list when we get to the memorials, if you're on Zoom, put them in the chat box. And if you're on YouTube and you're comfortable putting them on the chat box, please put them there. Melanie Goldberg is monitoring both of those boxes. Keep in mind that's particularly with YouTube, but not only. Well, she needs them as quickly as possible because she has to jot them down. She can't scroll through all these windows all at once, so it's a lot to ask. So if you know who you're going to mention, do it now. Of course, we have the names for the January 19th Yard Sites, and we'll get there in a moment. And then if you have questions, what I'd like to do optimally is if you're on camera, we can dialogue. So you raise your hand, and Arthur or Melanie will unmute you so that we can have a dialogue about the question. If you're, of course, on YouTube, we're not going to be able to do that at all. You can't speak and you can't be on camera, but you can try to put your question in the chat. Either on Zoom or there as well. And maybe there won't be a lot of Ask the Rabbis. Maybe everybody knows everything already. But the program that I had arranged to do tonight wasn't really it wasn't really something we could do online. So, all right. So a couple of last things to remind you that next week we have an incredible program. The weather is going to cooperate with us. It'll be rainy but warmer. And we have our first ever since I've been here. So that's with an asterisk. But first ever in 10 years at least, maybe more, Tu B'Shvat Seder. And we're going to have a lovely time. We'll have a 20-minute Seder. It's a custom that began in the hills of Tzfat in the northern part of Israel many hundreds of years ago. It's in its traditional format, a very sort of I guess I would call it mystical, anybody would call it mystical service, that played into some of the ideas behind Tu B'Shvat, which is really, after all, just a taxation day on the Mishnaic calendar. If you had fruits coming into bloom before that date, taxes were due at a certain time, after that date, a different time. But it did turn into something much more, really an early hope for spring to arrive. And we could certainly use that this year. After having a quite spring-like December, we got a quite Arctic January, and maybe by doing this we'll have our sights set on a much more spring-like remainder of the winter. The dinner will start at 6 o'clock with this very short, lovely service. Joseph will be there to provide some music for it. It's a 20-minute Seder. This isn't Passover. It involves fruits and nuts, and it's sort of appetizer foods. Then we will move to a Shabbat dinner. We'll say the blessing over the wine, and we'll have a lovely Shabbat dinner, probably a few songs at the end as well. I think it might be a little bit of a quieter version of what we did with our Shabbat Shira in the autumn, which we hope to repeat again next year. The price is only $5 a person, recommended donation. We're not collecting money at the door. You just put it in the hopper. So please bring a $5 bill if you can. And that's next week. The following week, and still in the spirit of Tu B'Shvat, Joel Brown, who is a longtime member of our congregation, but who, unbeknown to many of us, actually has been very involved in the Al Gore Climate Reality Project, is a trained advocate for a teacher for the Climate Reality Project. He spent many, many hours learning how to do presentations and to get across important information. And he's going to share some of that with us on the 2nd of February. So that'll be the week after next. If I didn't mention it, next week is 6 p.m., not 7 p.m., 6 p.m., only in person. So I'm sorry on YouTube, we can't include you, but it'll only be in person. The following week with Joel Brown, it'll be at 7. And then on February 9th, we will be joining the entire pro-choice Jewish world in the National Council of Jewish Women's Repro Shabbat. It's now become an annual event. Our guest speaker will be Nomi Joyrich. She is the Michigan director for the SHJ project called Jews for a Secular Democracy. I know that we all feel that there has been enormous strides in Michigan, and what else could there be left to do? Well, as it turns out, there's a few things left to do. We have a few little loopholes and things that we need to work out still here in what has become, I think, one of the most pro-choice states in the country, Michigan. And then I'll take you as far as February 16th, when that talk that I had originally scheduled for, I believe it was going to be next week, is on the rise of anti-Semitism of the left. I'll deliver that. If you're interested in the parameters of it, I'm not going to talk about that tonight, but in the last newsletter, I spoke about the parameters of it in the commentary. All right, that's enough business.
Hey, Jeff,
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but can you take the title slide down?
Well, we're about to use it, so no.
Oh, are you going to? Okay, because on the YouTube, you're just showing up in a little tiny box in the corner.
Yeah, that's okay. That's all right. I've got YouTube on too.
All right, that's fine.
Right at this moment, I'm going to continue with what's on the slide.
Yep, that's good. Thanks.
These Shabbat candles that we are about to kindle, they give light to all who behold them. So may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations who brought light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who bring light.
Baruch haor ba'olam, Baruch haor ba'adam, Baruch haor ba'shalom, ba'shalom, Baruch haor, Baruch haor b'Shabbat.
Let us endeavor to find still moments, quiet spaces within, to refresh ourselves, moments without ceaseless questions or inner debates, when we meditate only on goodness. Let us endeavor to nurture courage, recalling moments of strength. Let us remember days of fortitude and the power that we found. Let us endeavor to turn to light, to feel the warmth of a loving touch, our faces and fingers outstretched alive to each other.
Lachuna ranana, lachuna ranana, lachuna ranana, la Shabbat. Lachuna ranana, lachuna ranana, lachuna ranana, la Shalom. Naria, naria, la yom simchatenu, nikadme b'shalom. נריע נריע ליום שמחתנו בזמירות נריע לו לכו נרננה לכו נרננה לכו נרננה לשבת לכו נרננה לכו נרננה לכו נרננה לשלום.
There are times when we seek things for ourselves and measure failure by what we do not gain. When we gather on Shabbat, we seek not to acquire, but to share. There are times when we exploit nature as if it were a horn of plenty that can never be exhausted. When we gather on Shabbat, we consider our true place on this planet. There are times when we act as if we cared nothing for the rights of others. When we gather on Shabbat, we remind ourselves that justice is our duty and a better world our goal. Let us embrace this moment, a Shabbat to unite, to learn, to better ourselves.
Shalom Aleichem, Ohavei Shalom, Shomerei Shalom. Shalom Aleichem, Rodefei Shalom, Shalom Aleichem. Boachem b'shalom, ohavei shalom, zedchem l'shalom. Miyom ze leyamim habayim, shalom aleichem. Shalom aleichem, ohavei shalom, Shomerei Shalom. Shalom Aleichem, Rodefei Shalom, Shalom Aleichem.
May all who walk the paths of righteousness, who work for the good of humanity and bear the burdens of others, and who give bread to the hungry, who clothe the naked and take the friendless into their homes, see the work of their hands endure, and may the seed they sow bring abundant harvest.
Eifo ori, ori bi, eifo tikvati, tikvati bi, eifo kochi, kochi bi, vegam bach, vegam bach, eifo kochi, kochi bi, vegam bach. Where is my light? My light is in me. Where is my hope? My hope is in me. Where is my strength? My strength is in me and in you, and in you. Where is my strength? My strength is in me and in you, and in you.
Let us strive to lead loving, compassionate lives with our hearts, with our wisdom, and with our actions. These words we inscribe in our innermost being, aspiring to practice them day and night, teaching them diligently to our children through our words and especially through our deeds, so that the next generations may learn to revere and celebrate life.
מי האיש החפץ חיים, אוהב ימים לראות טוב. מי האיש החפץ חיים, אוהב ימים לראות טוב. נצור לשונך מרע ושפתיך מדבר מרמה. סור מרע ועשה טוב, בקש שלום ורודפהו. נצור לשונך מרע ושפתיך מדבר מרמה. סור מרע ועשה טוב, בקש שלום ורודפהו. מי האיש החפץ חיים, אוהב ימים לראות טוב.
All right, hopefully this will work. Tonight I wanted to do this reading, but I wanted to do it from the man's voice himself. This, as you probably can recognize from the opening title here, is the pale blue dot. On February 14th, 1990, as the first deep space probe Voyager 1 left our planetary neighborhood for the fringes of the solar system, engineers at Carl Sagan's behest turned it around for one last look at its home planet, now 4 billion miles away.
Consider that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering. Thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines. Every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization. Every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there on a mote of dust, suspended in a sunbeam. The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors, so that in glory and triumph, they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. The earth is the only world known so far to harbor life. There is nowhere else, at least in the near future, to which our species could migrate. Visit? Yes. Settle? Not yet. Like it or not, for the moment, the earth is where we make our stand. It has been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known.
Nase shalom ba'olam, nase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol ha'olam ve'imru shalom. Nase shalom ba'olam, nase shalom aleinu, ve'akol ha'olam ve'imru shalom shalom. Nase shalom ba'olam, nase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol ha'olam ve'imru shalom. Nase shalom ba'olam, nase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol ha'olam ve'imru shalom shalom.
In this community where we find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts toward all those who need our love and support, those who are ill, those who suffer pain of the body or spirit, those who are lonely, and those who have been wronged. Tonight, we extend our well wishes to these members of our community and to their loved ones, to Nitzan Bengal, Jim Walker, Kate Benamy, and to anyone whom you're thinking about now, whose name you hold in your heart. May they all be on the roll call of those to whom we extend our wishes for refuah shlema. May all who suffer know that they are not alone, that we are there. May they be healed quickly. May they experience a refuah shlema, a complete recovery, the renewal of their bodies and the renewal of their spirits. At darker times in Jewish history, there were moments such as this one during Jewish services when prayers were offered for those held hostage. Redeem captives was an essential mitzvah. Sadly, we once again find ourselves in such a reality. In the spirit of our ancestors who lived through those terrible days, we voice these fervent hopes. May those taken captive find the courage to carry on. May those who love them not despair of their return. May they soon emerge from their confinement whole in body and in spirit, to know once again the embrace of loved ones.
מקום הכוח בתוכנו, מקורות הברכה מעברותינו, May the source of strength that dwells so deep within us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Shalom. Kom hakoach betochenu mekorot habracha me'evrotenu. May those in need of healing know refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Shalom.
You can shed tears that they are gone, or you can smile because they have lived. You can close your eyes and pray that they'll come back, or you can open your eyes and see all that they have left. Your heart can be empty because you can't see them, or you can be full of the love that you shared. You can turn your back on yesterday, on tomorrow, and live yesterday, or you can be happy for tomorrow because of yesterday. You can remember them and only that they are gone, or you can cherish their memory and let it live on. You can cry and close your mind, be empty and turn your back, or you can do what we would want, smile, open your eyes, love, and go on. Our thoughts turn to those who are no longer with us, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We recall now our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. Tonight, our congregation mourns during this period of Shloshim, the first 30 days, the deaths of beloved congregants Bruce Goldsmith and Beverly Siegel. As we also observe the art sites this evening of these members of our congregation and their loved ones, of Esther Bitker, Vivian Brown, Josephine Burke, Bernard M. Cohen, Rose Dessenberg, Suzanne Dreyfus, Marion Gaber, Paula Goddard, Isidore Isaac Gusson, Irving Lang, Norm Parker, Edward Primack, Evelyn Primack, Ida Primack, Mary M. Rose, Maurice Safer, Samuel Sandler, Judith Schneider, Rose Schneider, William Shapiro, Michael Shernitt, Ralph Siporin, Shirley Cohen Wayburn, Emily Wilsey, and Sylvia Wilson. I'll turn now to Melanie, who will read some of the names that you've added to that list this evening.
Hi, Muroff, Marilyn Muroff, and Neil Cohen.
We say Yehi Zichram Livracha. May memories of them provide a blessing, by which we mean that what they have left behind to us, now that they've left this life, when they were beside us, that perhaps they will provide us with moments of consolation as we continue in our paths in their absence. Now we're muted because the music, it makes it very difficult to sing together. But even though we may not hear each other's voice, let us try to read together these words of our humanistic interpretation of Kaddish. Nitgadal v'nitkadash beruach ha'adam. Let us dignify and ennoble all people in the spirit of our shared humanity. Let us acclaim the preciousness of life. Let us show gratitude for life by approaching it with reverence. Let us embrace the whole world even as we wrestle with its parts. Let us each in our own way take up our share in serving the world and seeking truth. May our commitment to life help us to strengthen healing of spirit and peace of mind. May justice and peace permeate and comfort the house of Israel and all those who dwell on earth. And let us say, Ken Yehi, may it be so. All right, so as promised or threatened, if you're interested in asking me anything related to Judaism, this is the time to do it. Otherwise, I have a few questions here that were sent earlier by Bruce. Those are mostly about Israel, but I can hold those until we had a chance to talk about anything else. So just raise your hand and Melanie will unmute you. Anybody? Anybody? Going once? Going twice? Really? Nobody has any questions? Nothing about the tattoos you have and whether you can be buried in them, or how many wives can you have in Judaism? Nope, that's it. All righty. Well, I'm going to answer Bruce's questions. And these, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, though. I'm going to be honest with you, because this is, I will say this. The issue of Israel and the various things going on in Israel is probably the most, I would say, divisive in our movement. And I will also say this: I have endeavored with all of my internal strength to advocate on behalf of those in our community who have feelings about Israel that are negative, or who protest even its mere existence as a Jewish state. I've gone on record about that. I'm gonna speak personally here. I do not speak for the Jewish people or for the congregation when I talk about Israel. I want to make that very, very, very clear. I do not speak for the Jewish people. I do not speak for the congregation. I speak only for myself as a humanistic Jew. I was raised in a very Zionist household. I was raised in an atmosphere that was not that far removed from the Holocaust, with family that was not a victim to it, but certainly felt like the entire surviving contingent of the Jewish world felt a deep sense of having suffered as a people. For that reason, I always believed, and I still do, that a Jewish refuge is important on this planet. I think that 2,000 years of not having that proved themselves for what they are, a pipe dream of survival. I'm teaching this class about anti-Semitism. You're more than welcome to join us. We meet at, in fact, we're only beginning the first official session this Monday. We did a little introduction. So this Monday at 1, we're going to go all the way back to the Roman era, to Hellenistic civilization, to talk about horrible things that were said about Jews back then. And we'll trace it through both Muslim and Christian anti-Semitism. The questions that Bruce asked are questions that I think a lot of us are asking. Now, we tend as humanistic Jews, even if we're not negative towards everything about Zionism these days, we tend to be critical of Israel. And that's not that unusual. What you hear out there in the sort of more conventional Jewish world, I think that is a song about Netanyahu and all of that we're not going to be singing in unison ever again, if we ever were. And places like Federation and so forth, maybe even AIPAC, are going to have to get used to that. Our young people are not interested in that. But I will also say this, that the people that I've seen defending Israel in many ways online, shared with me by my own children at Instagram and other places where the youngins hang out, they're not singing the song of praise Netanyahu either. In fact, as angry as they are right now about what's happening, and what the anti-Semitism and other things that this has sparked, they are, I would say, just as or more angry at the Israeli government. And they are more and more convinced of the need for a two-state solution. I don't know whether that's possible or not anymore. I don't have the ability to see in the future or to really analyze that. But let me take these one at a time, Bruce, okay? So why do those who fight for Palestinian rights not protest the lack of courage of Hamas to fight out in the open or the terrorism of Russians against Ukrainians? This is a very complicated issue, and I'm only going to touch on it a little bit because I'm going to try to stay away from Israel when I speak on February 16th as much as possible, but you can't really completely stay away from it. Hamas is exploiting this moment, as are others who are anti-Zionist in a certain sense, that what they seek is not an accommodation or even a one-state, binational, egalitarian democracy. What they seek is the destruction of the Jews who live in and on that land. That's what they want. And this is not Jeff making this up. This is everything they have ever said or written. This is everything that their patrons, the Iranians, have ever said or written. And I have to say that I think that two things are happening. One is that there are a good number of particularly young people, but not only, who come out of a certain kind of social justice, I guess, template in their lives that we've always been part of and should continue to be part of, that recognizes the wrongs done in this country through colonialism and other kinds of wrongs. And slavery is certainly Jim Crow and everything else, every other inequity in this country towards people of color, beginning with the very first day that the Spanish were here and not ending even close yet. And those are people who have a spirit of goodwill, and they don't understand Israel at all. They could not, as I have frequently said, trying to be a little bit humorous, but also a little callous about it, I don't think they could find the river or the sea, or identify even which river or which sea we're talking about, with two magnifying glasses, a Palestinian and Israeli guide, and 3 GPSs hanging over their heads. I really don't. I think that they just like these slogans. They think that what they're hearing is true. They think that Israel is a white supremacist country. They do not understand at all that Israel is a majority of Jews of color who are the descendants of Jews who came from countries in North Africa and the Middle East who were thrown out. I am going to talk about this a little bit on February 16th, because this idea that the Jews are a bunch of white people from Europe who, in many cases, I'm hearing, deservedly were treated the way that we were by the Nazis, and that we then came and grabbed the country that belonged to somebody else, is so lacking in any grounding in reality or historical truth that it may actually be the biggest lie ever told on the planet Earth. And that's because there's a whole ginormous book that the largest religion on earth and the second largest religion on earth have both based their entire religion on, that talks about us in that land constantly. There are country after country after country, each one calling themselves, in most cases, not all, the Islamic Republic of this, that, or the other, from which Jews were expelled from the late 1940s through the early 1950s. Some of those countries, Jews have been in, or were in until they were expelled, longer than anyone from the Arab Peninsula. The failure of those who fight for Palestinian rights to understand any of this is due to their need, and it may be coming from a good place. I can't judge their motives, but I believe that some of them have the best interests of Palestinians and what they believe is happening at heart, who ignore what the Palestinians say. I don't think, just as an aside, that you can be a queer for Hamas and understand how Hamas feels about queers or women or non-Muslims in general. Now, it shades over, though, to people who I think are genuinely anti-Semitic, who just don't like Jews. And some of their ignorance is they don't want to hear anything we have to say. and they don't want to hear anything that comes out of our mouths or anything that we declare is historically true. Our connection to the land of Israel is completely erased. Our ethnic identities are completely misunderstood. The fact that Jews, again, in Israel, the majority of them come from Arab countries. And this extends from little things like attacking Israeli restaurants because they supposedly, stolen the foods of the Palestinians, the shawarma and the falafel, when the Jews who run these restaurants are by and large from places like Morocco, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, places where you don't have any Jews anymore because the Jews got thrown out. American left-wingers, especially the radical left, but not only, like to view everything through the prism of the white supremacist attack of Spain and the rest of Europe on this land and its indigenous population. I've been heartened to see that there are indigenous people in this country, a lot of American Indians, who have been very supportive of Israel. They know history. So many of them became Christian, and I think they were exposed to our texts. I would probably, if I had a little bit more guts right now, share with you a sketch about that was broadcast on Israeli television at Christmas time. In Bethlehem in Judea, it took place, Judea, that answered the ongoing canard that Jesus was a Palestinian and not a Jew or something like that. And it shows some Berkeley professor and two pink hair, rainbow haired young people who are with him coming in to congratulate the new king of the Palestinians. And little Mary is there. My child is what now? A Palestinianum? My joke has been that when we go through the malls at Christmas time, I've never heard a song that went Noel, 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 born as the king of Palestine. And the funniest line in the entire sketch was, if the Jews killed Jesus, but there were no Jews in Israel until 1948, who were those Jews? So that's why they fight for Palestinian rights, thinking that they're fighting alongside Hamas as some kind of resistance organization. Well, let me get back into my comfort zone. Why do right-wing leaders and settlers in Israel want to move Palestinians off their land, out of Gaza? How can you cope with this anger? There's not more outrage verbalized among American Jews. There actually is a lot, though. Maybe it's just because I hang out with those groups. The history of the right-wing Zionist world is fascinating, and I've spoken about it on previous Shabbats and in many other arenas. Zionism was not a religious Jewish invention. It was a secular Jewish invention. Now, some of those Jews were cultural, humanistic even, like Echad Ha'am, one of my heroes. Others were socialists. In fact, a very, very large number of them were socialists. Others of them were capitalist neoliberals that are the revisionist Zionists, as they were called. But there were very few religious Zionists. The religious Zionists came out of a very specific moment in Israeli Zionist history. There was a tiny little handful of them at the beginning of the state. There was a group of Orthodox women in this country that were called the Mizrahi women. You may remember them. They were not Mizrahi Jews. That's a mistake. They were not Eastern Jews. They were Ashkenazic American Jewish women, but they were Orthodox, and they became Zionists. Becoming a Zionist as an Orthodox Jew in the 1930s, 40s, and so forth was hard because it meant cooperating with the not the Reform Jews, who were not yet Zionists, by the way. It meant cooperating with the socialist atheist Jews, and they didn't want to do that. But by the time the 1950s came around, a small number of religious Jews were supporting Zionism. There's a small number. And if you want to see this play out in a wonderful movie, just go watch The Chosen. A lot of people watch The Chosen and they don't realize that the two friends are both Orthodox. One is modern Orthodox and he's become a Zionist, and the other one is Hasidic and he is not. The Hasidic who decided not to become Zionist, it was because the Messiah hadn't come yet. But the modern Orthodox Jews who became Zionists In 1967, they became inspired by the victory in the Six-Day War. And suddenly we went from such a small handful of them that you couldn't count them on 2 hands and 2 feet to 1,000, 2,000, 20,000, 100,000, 200,000. And they, despite the fact that they came from a kind of a modern Orthodox world, because after all, Zionism is a modern and not particularly compatible with Jewish religion idea, because it doesn't leave things in the hand of God. They still began to grow, and they became more religious, and some of them are quite Haredi these days. And they have this idea that came from the secular and reform and conservative Jews, that if you want something to happen, if you want God to send the Messiah, you should do something about it. You should show God how much you want it. And since God gave you this victory over the West Bank, in particular the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, as they call it, you should really prove to God how grateful you are for that victory by making sure that the land is ready for resettlement and for retaking. A lot of these people do not identify with the modern state of Israel. And in fact, in Israel, they sometimes call them Judeans. They seem to have much more affinity with the ancient kingdom of Judah than with the modern democracy of Israel. But they have used democratic means to gain power. Their leaders were two important leaders. One who was more about the settlement, which was Eliezer Cook, the son of the first modern Orthodox Zionist rabbi, whose name was Rav Avraham Yehuda Cook. I'm getting his name wrong. I'm sorry. It's late, and I should have written it down. Avraham Tzvi Cook, and the other was Meir Kahane, who we were more familiar with because he was from America. So those two wings, I wouldn't say that they are necessarily not opposed by American Jewry. I think they are. And I think that opposition to Netanyahu, who was never one of them, he's not a religious Jew at all, that they have, as you said in your third question, they've lost their cultural and intellectual humility, and they've created a sense of superiority. And indeed, in Israel, they call them Jewish supremacists. And they're very much disliked. You have to keep in mind that there are only 500,000. I know it sounds like a large number, but there are 500,000 settlers in the West Bank, and most of them are not these people. Most people who settle in the West Bank settled there for economic reasons, so they could have a big house instead of a tiny apartment. You have a tiny apartment in Petach Tikva, you can have a large house 3 miles away in Shaarei Tikva, where I have friends. Very, very nice, comfortable house. He's paying exactly the same amount for that he paid for a closet in Petach Tikva. So, yes, they do lose this sense of humility because they believe that God is on their side. You know, we humanistic Jews, we don't have any understanding of a God like this. Even our reform or otherwise upbringings did not introduce us to a God that, you know, does this kind of stuff and makes these kinds of demands. But for them, God is a personality. God is someone they talk to. God is someone they have a relationship with. And God is someone that makes demands of them. And one of those demands is to settle this area. They were very upset when Sharon pulled out of Gaza. And that's kind of always been strange to me, because Gaza was never part of sort of ancient Eretz Yisrael, ancient land of Israel. It was always Philistia, part of the Philistine world, and the Jews didn't really have ever a foothold there. But I guess it was promised by God, supposedly, to Moses and the Jews, so that gives us our right. There's some people who want everything from the Nile to the Euphrates, but I think they'd be happy for the river to the sea. The question of whether or not 2 states is feasible anymore is a question that's really beyond my pay grade. I can't tell you if it is. It doesn't feel as possible as it once did. The fact that we talk about it now as the sort of, I guess, the more mainstream idea that American Jews have is a wonder to me, because back in the 80s and 90s, it was considered verboten to talk about that. You were truly hated the state of Israel. How can they possibly have 2 states? Now, I'll say this: what's happened with Hamas has shaken my faith in any Palestinian desire to have any kind of peace. I'd long ago given up on Eliezer Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich and Netanyahu, but those were my people. I can give up on them and hope that a new group of Jews will come through in Israel, Jewish leaders, and do better. But to give up on the Palestinians was actually harder for me because I thought, well, they're so oppressed, if they knew that they could live with dignity. But what happened in Gaza shows that they can't, that they're not real, that's not on their current agenda. The Hamas takeover of Gaza, which happened in 2006 through 7, honestly surprised me. I was there in Israel in 2005 during the withdrawal. It was a very emotional time for Jews, but Jews felt, the vast majority felt, that if they give this piece of property and put this under full Palestinian autonomy, it would give the Palestinians an opportunity to show what they could do. And they believed that they could do a lot. This idea that they put them in there and they imprisoned them in an open air prison and this and that, it's nonsense. They built an international trade center called Kerem Shalom, the vine of peace. They were so ready. They left behind all those greenhouses. They left behind everything they could. Billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars have been injected into Hamas, into Gaza, and hijacked by Hamas or simply raised by Hamas. The amount of infrastructure that was necessary, the planning, the brains that had to go into creating all of this, including the weaponry and the tunnels and everything else, is beyond belief. And a handful of these leaders, the leaders of Hamas, are so wealthy, it's mind-boggling. Personal wealth in the billions of dollars. I've never been to these places that they say that it could have become like Singapore, but I've had friends who have come back from Singapore and said it's a pretty small area, and it's certainly worse off geographically and in terms of natural resources than Gaza, with its magnificent beaches that could have been. Israel didn't impose this blockade. Israel and Egypt imposed it because of what Hamas did and because of the bombs that were landing all the time. I was there before the Iron Dome. I hung out in Sderot one day, which is on the border of Gaza, when the rockets were smaller, but there was no Iron Dome. It was the scariest moment of my entire life. I couldn't believe how stupid I was to be there. I went down there to show solidarity, and all I wanted to do was get the heck out. It was just so scary. It was worse than when I accidentally wandered into Lebanon in the north. At least there were some Israel. That was in 2006 after that war. That was another story altogether. I went down to support them, and I got bombed as a reward. Hamas is a terrorist group. Hamas is a terrorist group that terrorizes its own people, although they have tempered that somewhat because they are not the majority. It's, I heard someone who was quite a right-wing Jew the other day say, they're all Hamas. They're not all Hamas. Now, they've all been brainwashed to believe what Hamas believes, but, people can be brainwashed into believing a lot of things. And I've certainly met enough Orthodox right-wing Jews and otherwise right-wing Jews when it comes to Israel that I know that. Why do people conflate anti-Semitism with protest against the right-wing leadership and population drift in Israel? Well, they do, because a lot of it is. Now, that's not saying all of it is, but lately a lot of it is. And I'm going to talk about this on February 16th too, and I wrote about it in the last newsletter. You can go take a look. The notion that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism can be understood in a various ways. So, for instance, if you believe truly that what is being called for when people say they're anti-Zionist is the erasure of Jews from that land, Jews who have been living there now and building a state for 75 years plus, I can see that's anti-Semitic. I can call that anti-Semitism. It's not generally what I hear from the people protesting before October 7th. Before October 7th, the people who were protesting were, at least the ones that I knew, were mostly Jews anyway. I don't know a lot of people in Students for Justice in Palestine and things like that. But I hosted on behalf of Jewish Voice for Peace. I hosted during right after the pandemic lockdown. I hosted a Zoom seminar which asked the question: Is anti-Zionism anti-Semitism? And the answer was not necessarily. Most clearly, not necessarily. There are two different statements, working statements they call them, about the definitions of anti-Semitism. They're mostly alike, but there's a few words in one that are different in the other. And I wrote about that too last week, and I've written about it before. So please, I refer you to that. It's still on our website. It's still in that newsletter that's right there. I believe it was the last thing I wrote. If not, you can certainly find it one issue back. The International Holocaust Researchers Association, the IHRA, I may be getting the stand for wrong. The IHRA says that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, period. Because it's the denial of Jews having a right to any sovereignty and any sovereign nation of their own, and that's unique in the world. They don't say that there, but you'll often hear them say, well, only the Jews are denied their sovereignty. It's not true. Lots of other people are denied sovereignty too. There's no Basque homeland. The Quebecois don't have their own country. But you can see that point of view, especially if it's being worded in certain ways. I happen to believe that it's not necessary. I don't think Rashida Tlaib is an anti-Semite. I just don't. Hawaira Haraf, I'm getting her name wrong again too, locally. I don't think she is either. I think Palestinians who don't want a state of Israel that's got, Jewish privilege from beginning to end. I understand why. I think they're wrong, by the way. I think they should put their effort into building their own country. And the reason I think they're wrong is they've been fed a lie that someday they're going to be able to boom back to Tel Aviv and get their old house back. That old house is gone a long time ago, and it wasn't in Tel Aviv to begin with. And so that's just silly. We Jews, 2,000 years ago, 2,000 years, we walked around thinking we were going to get to move back to Israel, but we never thought we were going to get to move into the same house. And this myth that you're going to get to move into the same house is very damaging to Palestinians. And it's been spread for a very long time. But I still don't think it's anti-Semitic. I don't think that Rashida Tlaib is anti-Semitic. I don't agree with her on the way she's handled this situation. I don't agree with the fact that she's put kid gloves on Hamas, but I understand it, and I don't think it's Jew hatred. The anti-Zionism that most people associate with Jew hatred is the kind that comes out of Hamas and out of the people like in Iran, which is really the world capital of this, which is death to Israel. And by that, they mean death to the Jews or displacement of the Jews. Listen, Jews have been displaced many, many times. We know what it is to be displaced. The Jews have a place there now, and that's what it is. The Jews have to make room for another country to be there. I mean, that's the only possible thing that could work out with this. I tend to be a supporter of New Israel Fund. I like that group. Esther Ingber's group that she's involved with, I like that group too. These are groups that have, the aim anyway for us to be liberal Zionists. Other people say liberal Zionism is impossible. Some people say we should drop the word altogether. This all gets very, very complicated. Now, as to what's happening lately, the anti-Palestinian protests have in many cases drifted into anti-Semitism. When you're on campus in the Central Quad or Mall, and you're yelling "River to the Sea," blah blah blah, I'm gonna write that one off. I'm not gonna make that automatically anti-Semitism. But even if you go with the other statement, the one that I didn't mention yet, the Jerusalem Declaration on anti-Semitism, even they say that while anti-Zionism as an intellectual exercise or even a realpolitik goal in the sense that there would be a binational state or a confederation or something, while that's not anti-Semitism, that's the only place they depart from the other statement. The other statement's important because a lot of governments use it, and particularly they use it to shut down debate on campus, and I don't think we should be doing that. But when you're then taking that, the river should to the sea or whatever it is you're chanting, over to Chabad House or to the Hillel in the middle of their Shabbat services and pounding on their windows and their doors, and I've seen the video, with a megaphone, that's anti-Semitism. Because you are doing what every statement on anti-Semitism has made very clear is anti-Semitism. You are targeting Jews for the things you don't agree with in Israel. I used to run a Hillel, two Hillels. One in particular, we had a very, very vocal group of, I would say, non-Zionist kids. They weren't that into Israel. And yet, when the predecessor, the Students for Justice in Palestine kinds of groups came to our Hillel and started disrupting our Shabbat dinner, they felt targeted. I'm going to tell you something else too, and I'm going to talk about this on February 16th. Some of you all don't even realize Jewish Voice for Peace is being targeted by pro-Palestinian or Free Palestine people now. They're being called a sinister implant, I think was the word that was used. I have the slides. A sinister extension of Israel, sinister spies for Israel, because they're considered accommodationists. Why? Because they want to allow the Jews that are there to stay. And the policy of those people is the Jews have to leave. So when people now are conflating anti-Semitism with protests against the right-wing leadership, that's something else. And as I mentioned, most of the kids that I'm seeing on Instagram, thanks to my own kids sharing it with me, they're not in love with Netanyahu. Far be it. Far from it, I should say. Far from it. But they can't stand him. And most of Israel right now, the vast majority. There was elections tomorrow. He's supposedly would lose by 70%. How do I view the trial of the World Court between South Africa and Israel? I think that's the biggest freaking joke in the world. What are they? Look, Israel, you may not agree with its tactics. You may feel that its tactics are abhorrent. We can have all kinds of debates about its tactics. Israel's not committing and has not committed genocide on the Palestinians. It's just not true. And it cheapens the word genocide. And it cheapens what's happened to the Palestinians. They have undergone enough suffering than to have to now have this be the defense, that it's because Israel wants all the Palestinians in the world gone. Far from it. Palestinians have only grown in percentage. You know who hasn't grown in percentage? The Jews. We are not yet at our raw numbers since the end of the Holocaust, because a true genocide was committed against us. I read, somebody posted, again, I get these things from my kids. Well, I'm sure the Israelis don't think they're committing genocide. Has any people ever considered that they were committing genocide? Did the Germans even think that they were committing genocide? Well, they didn't call it genocide because the word wasn't made up till 1944. They had a different word. They called it the final solution. They knew exactly what they were doing. It's never been Israel's primary goal to get rid of the Palestinians. Now, you can say it's cultural genocide. I've heard that argument, but I think that this is a silly thing that's going on in the International World Court. I think it cheapens the court. I will say this, though, as an exercise in anti-Netanyahuism, here's a little fact that you might all know about. You might not know about, and it's where I'm going to finish tonight. As it turns out, when Israel needed defending in the World Court, who did they call upon? Just curious. Does anybody know who they called upon to defend them in the World Court? Justice Aharon Barak. Justice Aharon Barak was asked by Netanyahu and accepted the challenge of appearing before the World Court to defend Israel against charges of genocide. Justice Aharon Barak is the man that Netanyahu and his government have been attacking through these so-called reforms of the judicial system for the past 2 years now. Everything that they want to change was something that was introduced by him, primarily revolving around the need for judicial review, which every democracy needs, and many democracies forget to build into their constitution. And we, by the way, are not innocent in that. Everybody here who's ever taken any law class knows that our Constitution forgot to put that in. And it was Marbury versus Madison. When was that, 1803? That took a while. Took a couple of decades before we got a court case that invented judicial review for us. Well, that's what Aharon Barak did in Israel. And who does Netanyahu, after he's been defaming this man, he and his cronies for months and now years, he begs Aaron Barak to go to the World Court, and he's defended us. He's defended the the position of Israel very well there. All right, nobody else gave me any questions, so I talked a long time about this, and I'm going to stop now. We're gonna conclude. We're gonna be in person next week, everybody, 6 o'clock. Please come to our Tu B'Shvat Seder. It'll be a short, lovely evening. I get too many too much COVID PTSS from doing these things on Zoom. So, all right, I'm gonna try to put the song back up. Everybody, unmute yourself if you can't hear. I'll unmute you all. Can I do that? We can all wish each other Shabbat Shalom. How do I?
No, you can't unmute them.
Yeah, you
Everybody has to unmute themselves.
Yeah. Everybody can unmute yourself. However, don't try singing too much because it's really hard to sing on Zoom. You would think that they would have fixed that, but
They can sing if they want to sing. They can sing. It's just
no, I mean, it's
the person with the loudest voice always comes to the fore.
Okay, so that'll be you. Wait, screen share. Here we go.
And yeah, I also have a postlude I want to give as a gift to everyone tonight after this song.
Okay.
Is that okay, Rabbi Jeff?
Yeah.
Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Behold how good it is when people dwell together, living as one people, hand in hand. What keeps life strong is that we have each other, one human family across the land. Go up a half step. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Is everyone still there?
Yeah.
Okay. This is just a little, I just want to leave you with this little wish. Oh, the weather outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful. And since we no place to go, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. Oh, it doesn't show signs of stopping, and I brought some corn for popping. The lights are turned way down low. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom. When we finally kiss goodnight, how I hate going out in the storm. But if you'll really hold me tight, all the way home I'll be warm. The fire is slowly dying, and my dear, we're still goodbying. But as long as you love me so, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom.
Well,
Shabbat Shalom, y'all.
we've appropriated another culture tonight, haven't we?
Yes, it's called.
All right, everybody, please RSVP by Wednesday. It'll all be in the newsletter again for next week, so we can be together and celebrate Tu B'Shvat and Shabbat in person. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Good night.
Good night.